highlighter. It's something I've been doing since I crawled out of college in 1982. Yes, I'm an old git. And I did 20 years of traditional watercolour using ink line to define it. Then turned to digital in the year round about 2000. Favourite software at the time was Painter. Even though it crashes a lot, and it's improved a lot since then, but it made me move away to software like ArtRage and Sketchbook Pro because they suit the way I think and the way I work, which is based on drawing, which is why I'm looking at this software now, because it's nice and responsive in the same way that ArtRage and Sketchbook Pro are. You can just pick it up, you can just use it. No big faffing, no, it's not full of clever tools. That's its plus, and its minus it will be for some people. For me, that's a plus. It has a limited tool set. Hopefully it will expand a bit more. I'd like it to be expanded a little bit more. But it's perfectly adequate for getting good results. And look, these like the pencils. What's a pencil? Pencils are very responsive. Other tools similarly so. So you're not doing anything that wasn't shown in the rather tedious introduction. If you want firm line, use the markers. If you want soft line, use the pencils. If you want a watercolory look that builds up, use the highlighters. Something that I would like to see come into the software, which it hasn't got yet, is layer blending modes, because that suits the way I think in terms of I paint in a watercolory way, laying washes over, building up, that kind of thing, and blending modes, a few blending modes would be super, and I'm hoping that's something they'll implement in the future. You may be looking at this and thinking, oh, this doesn't impress me very much, and if you're going to compare it to things like Painter, and that's the kind of thing you want, then that's not what this is about. The big thing about this software is it's not present in any other software that I know in drawing painting software, is the infinite canvas. You can zoom in and out to your heart's delight. You could just go on and on and on and on. You're normally constrained by limits, definite limits in any other canvas, any other software, by the limits of the canvas size. Sketchbook Pro, as far as I know, will only go to about 6,000 pixels. This is what I found. I use it for professional stuff, and this is what I found. I hit a wall at about 6,000 pixels. So that might be to do with the limits of my system. But this is different. If you're going to print, I think there's a 10,000 pixel limit on this. But in terms of just keep drawing on the actual software itself, you can just keep scrolling and zooming and scrolling and zooming, and you think, oh right, yeah, but that's okay. But what's it going to look like when it's blown up? But because it's got some kind of vector architecture under this, though you wouldn't necessarily know it, which means that you don't lose quality when you do this, which is kind of unprecedented. I don't know if I pronounced that right, but that is the big thing about this software. It's a huge thing, and I can't imagine that others aren't going to take notice and go, hey, I think we need to do something to address this. This is something that people might like. Well, I like it. I'm not sure quite what I'm going to do with it yet, but it makes you think in a different way. What about an endless cartoon strip? What about endless worlds that you can build? What about collaborations that you can pass it on to the next person, can add to it? And there's all sorts of these sort of things that are made much easier by this software, and enhanced by the fact that file sizes that it makes are remarkably small. That's not to say that when you're working on it and you get to bigger sizes, or the more extreme ends of zooming in and out, that the software itself won't slow down, because obvious't there's a lot to remember. But the file size when you save it is still small. That's nice, isn't it? I'm doodling away here. I ought actually to get on with something, shouldn't I? So let's just clear that using this here, clear layer. I have to say, this is still a new software to me, as it will be to you guys, so I will make mistakes as I go. Now this particular vidcap is tied in with a themed issue for Imagine Effects magazine about book illustration. Partly why they contacted me to do this, because I am a book illustrator. And the original sort of splash screen with the text on about Once Upon a Time was kind of a clue to that, really. It's just an excuse to do that. The text, obviously, as you can see, there's no text options down here. I imported that from, I made that in Draw Plus software, Serif Draw Plus software. I use that software for vector text and that kind of thing. Brought that in because you can import JPEG images, and that's all I did there, and then just drew the little figure on top of it. The idea being that she will form the basis for a fantasy illustration. Imagine Effects is a fantasy magazine after all, fantasy art magazine. So we just draw a few boxes. Really accurate, as you can see. Ooh. I could, I suppose, use the why don't I do that instead? See, not easy. I told you, I'm not particularly familiar with this software. Not that it's important for, I mean, they're not accurate anyway, so then go back to the normal drawing tool. Obviously you've got polyline, straight line, circle, well, or ellipse, eyedropper, which of course you've got a lot of the same shortcut tools. Sorry, that I've got a new tablet and that keeps doing that. I'm not used to playing with it yet. It's an Intuos Pro. The eyedropper, Alt, which is common to a lot of software. So there's a lot of familiar shortcuts that will make life easier. Spacebar is move the canvas. Spacebar and Control do the zooming. It's moving nice and smoothly now. I will say that after I did that initial image, which was a number of layers, I then flattened that. We're still in the same file. If I was to zoom right out, you'd see we were still in the same file. So that's going to become annoying. Ignore that. But there's no really point doing that. Take my word for it. We're in the same file. We have zoomed in on the book, on the tiny little disc on the front of the book, and we're at this scale now. This is sort of just a demonstration of what this is like. So the text suggested that she sort of visits these different worlds, and so see how responsive it is. It's just great for sketching. Thinking sort of Alice in Wonderland, you're just standing on giant mushrooms kind of thing. Balance it with another shape there. Don't know if she could be in shadow here. That would throw her forward. I don't know, there's things hanging down underneath. Something on top. Yeah, my original idea was sort of thinking about her being surrounded by sort of interesting things. Don't know. The point is that with this I will doodle, and then I will zoom in on this and turn it into the actual piece. Or how about flying? That's another big fantasy that a lot of people, or dream that a lot of people have. It might also be quite nice Hair flapping behind. Arms out. As with all art creation, I think for me, I mean, I can only talk about my own way of doing things, and this isn't definitive. There's nothing definitive about the way I do things. It's just the way I do things. It works for me. If there's any parts of this that you find work for you, do please use them. If you find they don't, do it your way. Do it your way. That's the point. Everybody finds their own way of doing these things. But for me, you have to stay loose to start with. So the fact that this looks like pants, well, it probably look like pants when I finish as well, knowing me. But it'll be tidy pants, because I'll have neatened up the edges. There could be all stuff underneath, I don't know, looking up at her. Dragons and... more like a horse, but never mind. I'll give it wings. She'll be flying over all these things. Oh, you're trying to give a range of things. If you go for an extreme close-up, that's not that extreme, but with a look of wonder on her face. Happy, of course. Yes, she's a funny looking girl. That might be quite nice if she was peering into something. She could be peering into something, looking at something close up here. Fascinated by, I don't know, some kind of little person. Not noticing that there's something big coming up behind her. My illustrations tend to be narrative. I like to tell stories. It's part of being an illustrator. Yeah, it's part of the job remit is that you're normally fulfilling, visualizing someone's tale, someone's words. Not exclusively, but in what I do as a children's book illustrator, that tends to be like that. So then she would be in shadow here. They could be in total wonder. Of the three so far, this is the one I'm warming towards. I'm not going to do thumbnail forever. It's not really what this is about. It's just to show what we can do with it. And then something big coming up behind. That she hasn't seen. That's not working, completely working, but it's kind of the idea. Something coming towards her. Something. Let's try that one, shall we? Right. So, using spacebar and Control. I'm doing this on the express keys on my Wacom tablet. I will zoom in. Spacebar. I'm moving it across. Ooh, not bad. Almost got the dimensions right. Not bad for a guess. Right. Now I'll use that as a guide. What I didn't mention on the layer control is opacity. Slider at the bottom there. Knock it down a bit. Now I can use that as a rough Put another layer, still going to use the same tool, and then start to, you'll notice now I've zoomed in, the pencil has stayed the same scale, so it's comparatively very small again, very fine on the canvas. So I haven't had to change the size to have a fine pencil. In fact, I probably want a slightly bigger pencil, so I'll go for the next size. Yeah, you can change the size of all these, which is I probably have done already, and I've just forgotten what the original default settings were. You can always look at those. But I'll knock that back a bit more. There are some nice brush size controls, shortcuts. Get onto the right layer. I'm good at painting on the wrong layer. You can name your layers. Double click on it. I'm on a PC, by the way, using Windows 7 Home Premium. It's an i5. Call it Draw 1. So hopefully, when I get a few more layers in there, it'll help me navigate. I'm great at I'm a layer whore, as people would say. I love layers. They are the godsend of digital. Now, what allow you to isolate and move and play and edit endlessly. Oh, yes, that's another thing about this, as well as infinite canvas. Talking to the lovely lady from the company about when I was sort of being set up to do this, I think you will find that you have almost infinite undos on this as well. This is Art Rage boasts something close. Lots and lots. You can go back and back and back and back and back and back and back. Not necessarily a good thing, because it just means you keep going back and back and back and back and back, and not moving forward. But at times, just what you need. Alright, she's an ordinary girl. She's supposed to be an avid reader. I wonder if I should have her a bit specky. I mean, wearing glasses. Now, I wear glasses. I'm not being anti-glasses person type thing. It's well, it's a fairly cliched thing. If you read a lot, maybe your eyes aren't great. But suppose we were working for a children's book, it might be something that would be included as an indicator that this person is intellectual, likes to read, a bit geeky. Again, it's stereotyping. But if someone's coming to this image totally fresh, it would tell them things. You have to give people visual cues. That's what illustration is all about. Well, that's what this sort of art and that is all about. Let's see. Back shoulder. It'll be all about. This will be all about. Where's she looking? That's wrong. Right. Some undo there. I want her looking. Maybe almost looking boss-eyed because she's so focused on what she's looking at. She doesn't look very happy about it, does she? So need to turn up the corners of her mouth a bit so that she can look happy. I also don't want her to look like an imbecile, which at the moment she's veering towards. I want a sense of wonder, not a sense of bimbo. In fact, that eye is a bit funny, isn't it? That's too low, isn't it? Let's got the eraser, reverse tip eraser. Doink. Line the eye up better. He says probably putting it in exactly the same place. That's the sort of thing I do. I'm very right-handed when it comes to seeing. I tend to. You have got flip canvas, or you can flip the image. I can't remember how. Shortcut key. It's in here, it's in here, it's in here. Doobie 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 doo. See, these are all, there we go, canvas layer flipping. Canvas flip layer horizontal, shift control F. It's always a good idea to check things like that. Oh, go away. Which is shift. I said this tablet's new to me as well. I'll do it on the keyboard. Shift control F. Oh my goodness, she's ugly too. Let me go back. Yes, she looks like she's got real problems. Apart from having an enormous jaw. In fact, probably the best thing I could do. This isn't very exciting for you. This isn't really telling you much about the software, is it? I should probably just do this and speed it up, and then talk over the top. So I may do that. I'll go away and do this without commentary, and then come back to it and put commentary over the top when it's going much faster, so you don't go into a coma of total boredom while you're watching it. Okay, right, I will do that now. You'll suddenly notice I'm working much faster. It's a trick. So the first thing to do is get rid of the eyes, straighten them up. Use guides, you can always rub them out later. This is actually speeded up 4 times. I'm making her nose a little bit bigger to give more of a feeling of, give it more shape. You're looking up at her. It makes it more, that's why I've dropped the ears, because if you're looking up, the ears to be further back. I think I've made, push them back further, I think. A bit later, they still don't look quite right. It's just all drawing. I said everything I do is based on drawing. So I've given her pupils, because it helps her focus. Given her, thickened up her lips a bit, firming up her hairline. Just generally beefing things up, beefing the line up a bit. Mostly just using the pencils at the moment. I've made her eyes look a bit like she's been punched, but I'll knock that back a bit later. Made her jaw a little bit more delicate. A little bit more feminine, doesn't look quite like a boxer now. Now trying to decide what little character it is she'll be looking at. I think I want to make the character look like it's afraid, and she'll think it's afraid of her, but actually it's afraid of the thing coming up behind her that she hasn't seen yet. That's the idea anyway. I can't quite decide on what to do with this character. The angle isn't helping. I want to get the character leaning away, but from this angle it's a little bit tricky to make work. I'll work it out. This is what I do. I just trial and error, trial and error. Digital, we love it. This is what you can do. In the old days I would have had to just do a lot of sketching beforehand, but this is my sketching. This is part of it. Just get rid of it on the in the layers. Maybe a little short fat character. Give it a bit more character, a bit more comic. No, I don't think this angle is going to work, but I'll stick with it for the moment. Might be able to make it work. We'll see. Right, let's move on to do a bit of blocking in maybe. Now I know what we'll do. We'll do some. We'll give it some shade. At the moment I've been relying on the sketch underneath for shade. Turn that off, and then using the highlighters set to very low opacity, and but quite a large size, you can mark in some of the shapes. It makes it easier to, if you're just using line, it's harder. It's harder to get the line right. If you actually work out the forms using tone, it will help you. I'm using a dark tone, very low opacity, and then building it up slowly, exactly as I would have done with watercolours in real media. As you see her, this is kind of symbolic. She is in the dark in every sort of sense. Her face is away from the light, but also she doesn't know what's going on behind her. Again, more visual sort of more visual language. Blocking her in a very bold pink colour to pick out her skin tones. T-shirt, so her arms will be exposed. Eyeballs a slightly warmer colour. This is completely the opposite of what I should be doing. Often they're a cooler colour. And now I've sped up to 8 times just because this is tedious drawing stuff. This will be me faffing around, rubbing out, changing my mind, redrawing. Like that little character changing. I still haven't decided what I'm going to do with this. Still not right. I know it's in there somewhere, but this is what I feel about drawing. It's a question of finding the drawing. Kind of looking for it. Doing some tidying up and a bit of rubbing out here and there. See the eraser flashing on and off in the tool, in the active tool box display. Just consolidating, adding a few lines here and there. Thinking about the guy in the background. I'm wondering about having him angled the other way. She's leaning to the left. Compositionally, maybe I should have him leaning to the right, or moving slightly right. Sort of stepping in. I'm thinking some sort of, excuse me, I'm having a quick yawn here. Lots of late nights I've been doing. He is some sort of hulking type character, some beast of a brute. I've got no clear picture of what he's going to be, so there's going to be a lot of faffing around with this, trying to decide some big-jawed, small craniumed thing, supposedly to indicate low intelligence, eyebrows angled down to indicate menace or ill temper. No, don't like him. I'm wondering if my first thumbnail was better with his shoulders tipped that way. Seems to echo her more, seems to fit in better. What do I do with him? What do I do with him? Well, firstly, I draw him with his head far too big. No, that's wrong. Dear me. That's what I look like in the mornings. Tip that shoulder up more. Maybe he'll have a club, in which case that could be sort of dragging. Maybe leaning, and it looks a bit more ape-like. Now, as you see, dither. But this tool is great for sketching ideas. See how immediate it is, responsive. This is just using pencil and ruler. I've drawn him on a separate layer, by the way, so that I can get rid of him completely if I want to, just by clearing the layer. And also if I want to move him, apologies for the yawn again. No, I'm thinking maybe having it leaning forward on a bough of some description. Bough, I mean branch, tree trunk, whatever. Finding it hard to come to a clear idea about him, so I'm blocking in some form to get a better idea of how he's going to fit in. Lighting from above and behind, light with her. So he will be mostly in shadow, and hopefully that will make him seem more ominous. Simple stuff again. The eye is still pretty weird, as you can see. I'm going to get to that now. Not saying I'll get it right now, but I'll have another go at it. And also the little figure that she's looking at. That's probably closer to the sort of thing we're thinking. Little fat chap. Yeah, back on the eyes again. They will need tidying. They will be eyes are always a fairly focal point on any composition, so you need to get them looking pretty good. And they're pretty scratty at the moment. It's getting closer to being making more sense. People's eyes don't tend to be perfectly symmetrical, so I never worry too much about that. And her eyes definitely aren't symmetrical or in proper perspective, so I'll probably have yet another go at that. One eyeball is definitely bigger than the other one. Now, working on the body colour, I'm adding a little bit of modelling on that, which will then be compounded by the layer over the top of a translucent shade that I'm doing. It refers back to the watercolour technique where you build up tone and depth with various layers. It adds more subtlety. You can control it more easily that way than working on just one layer. That's not to say that a lot of people prefer to work on a single layer. It simplifies things in as much as you're not fumbling through layers trying to find out which bit you're working on. It just doesn't. It's not my way particularly. It does work very well if it's done properly. Just like as I said earlier, if you find your own way. Oh dear, look how blobby her shading looks. I'll need to sort that out a bit later. Whereas when I was pulled further out, that looked not too bad. Now it looks like she's been dipped in the mud. So obviously that's something I'll need to smooth out. It's a little bit grotty looking. Ooh, it looks like someone's knocked her teeth out as well. I'll have to give some teeth a bit later. She should be sucking something very soft. Yeah, she's an odd looking. I don't tend to do particularly pretty people. I'm all for the quirky and ugly myself. As I just said, I've gone over and I've redone that tonal layer. That was using the highlighter on a reduced opacity layer, and I've also knocked out the opacity of the highlighter itself a little bit, so you can build that more slowly. You can see in the colour I was using a fairly dark tone. You have to when you're knocking the opacity back, otherwise it doesn't even register. It'd be too subtle. I've also changed. Now I'm going back and changing the colour and adding in colour variants to it, because shadows. Otherwise, it makes shadows can be very dead. Adding a few sort of warmer skin tones in there. Tidy. See how there's some teeth come in. She looks a bit more human now. Like she has a bit more normal. That's in my own terms. As I said, I don't tend to do particularly pretty people. Starting to block in some hair. Her hair will be blonde later. Oh yes, something I didn't mention earlier that just flashed up there. If you go into Edit and Preferences, you can set how smooth the lines you draw are. So if you need to do something that is very regular and smooth, and it's something I don't particularly like to do, have turned on too high. I've got it set to default, which I think is a sort of a moderate sort of setting, but you can smooth things a lot more. Place to save every now and again, that was flashed up then as well. Naming layers so I don't get completely lost. Extending the arms a bit more, blocking in her t-shirt in a bold colour. Yellow is a colour that comes forward, so that will help bring her forward. Blocking in the hair with a dark tone, and then we'll work over. Not particularly good with hair. I'll try and make a good fist of it later. I switched on that so I could see what my original composition was. That was the original thumbnail layer. I'm extending beyond it because I may want to change that slightly. And then blocking in some shapes. The little character is going to be standing on a rock of some description. On a layer behind, I'm marking in some background trees in a lighter tone. It's just to get an idea of composition. As you can see, they're fairly crudely done. Now, because there's no texture brushes, there's no texture paper, I'm resorting to something I used to do in Sketchbook Pro before that had any textures, which is using a photo texture of a bit of rock. I've brought it in the import JPEG. I've skewed it to the way I want it to conform to the shape of the rock, and then just rubbed away the bits I don't want and softened the edges a bit. And I've knocked back the opacity, as you can see. Just adjust it up a little bit more. I will work back into this to make it fit in better. You see, I'm drawing on a layer over the top. I'm drawing more definition to it to try and define the rock shapes. I will also highlight on there and put some other tones. It's to do with making it fit with the actual composition, because unless you're very, very lucky, you're not likely to have a texture that fits in, conforms to exactly what you want in the composition. And this is just a dodge to get around the fact that there isn't anything to provide texture in here, as far as I found. Maybe that would be something I'd like to see in the future. In Sketchbook Pro they did that. They brought in texture brushes, or the ability to make custom brushes. If they could do that in this, that'd make it marvellous. I've added a layer of shadow over the top, again reduced opacity using dark tones, 2 dark tones, a sort of brown and a green, which I will then use to help define the form later by having shadow pattern over it. Again, cutting away what I don't want with the eraser. Now, something they suggest in the there is actually a manual, an online manual that you can download. It says you don't really need a manual, and you don't. But because you've only got the 6 spots to save colours in, it suggests that it's a very sensible suggestion. On a separate layer, you dedicate it to making a palette that you can then use the eyedropper tool on and put a few colours in. And that's what I've done there, just to show that how it can be done. I've just put a few skin tones there, and then you can just leave it on a separate layer. I'm working back, see, into the rock again, the layer over the rock, and trying to make the lighting conform more to the lighting pattern of the scene by highlighting the edges, picking out where the character will be stood. Oh, I wish I worked this fast. As I said, this is sped up with me putting narration on afterwards. Trying to remember exactly what I did. To choose the colour, I used the eyedropper tool on the rock itself, and then adjusted the tone within the colour wheel, within the square in the colour wheel, lightened it so that it should fit in. Cleaning it up a little bit more. See, I've pulled back so I can see the thing as a whole more, because it's easy to, if you're working in really tight, to lose track of how it fits in with the whole scene. I'm knocking away a few bits of shadow to try and define her eyeballs and the shapes a bit more. This is cutting away with using the eraser. You can see I'm using the soft eraser with a fairly start using the bigger size and then work down to details later. You'll keep more control that way. She still looks a bit blotchy, so I'll have to tidy up the tones there. I am, instead of just redoing it, I'm trying to do it by knocking it back this time, using the eraser. As I said, you do have good touch with these tools, so you can do that. You can control how hard you're erasing. Just use a bit of a soft touch, or if it helps, set up the sensitivity on your graphics tablet to be more responsive, if that helps. Yeah, that mouse is a bit funny. I'm going to have to sort that. As it's modelling up the various things again, this is working on the body colour beneath again. Turn the shadow on and off so you can see how it works together. Yes, he's still got a funny eye. Am I getting to that now? Yes, having another go at that now. And also getting rid of some of the extra lines that are in there. The danger is, with the ability to zoom in endlessly, is that you will be tempted to try and make every single line perfect, and the fact that you can keep zooming in and keep zooming in means you may be doing work you don't need to do if you know more or less what the scene. Pull back to see the scene every now and again so that you can see what you're actually doing and how it looks in the whole. Otherwise you'll end up with one very, very detailed bit, and it'll be lost really if you're planning on printing it. It all depends on what you're planning to do with your work. Back, tidying up the eyeball again, trying to get it looking in the same direction as the other one. It's getting closer. Eye lines are very important in scenes where you've got characters interacting. It's important where they're looking. This applies across the whole raft of things, including animation. Poses and eye lines very important. Not really much to say at the moment, so he moved it slightly again. The eyeballs are slightly different shapes, but that doesn't really bother me. As I said before, people don't tend to be perfectly symmetrical. They're a bit dull if they are. It can be dull if they are. Starting to lighten the hair with some lighter tones. Keep checking turning layers on and off. Yes, I think he needs to be more important in the scene. He could be the same scale as her, if not. I need to make him obviously more bigger and threatening, so I have enlarged him. And as you can see, I've gone beyond the boundaries of the original thumbnail. So what will happen is I will pull out the composition a little bit more. Building up her t-shirt tone now, again on a body colour layer, and then going back to working on him, because I still haven't decided what he's going to be yet. There'll be some more fiddling going on here. Okay. Looks like quite a lot of my relatives, especially the hair. I'm from a very handsome family. Yeah, I'd prefer his head to be tilted. Her head is tilted that to the left. I'd like his head tilted to the right, like he's looking past her shoulder to see our little chap. No, it's looking a bit. No, it's trying out a different sort of head shape. Maybe with it turning into a sort of a tree stump on top, so that he's some sort of forest creature. Don't know if I like that particularly. No, I don't think I do. Got rid of his tone, the same as I did for her. His tone was a bit blotchy. I've just tidied it up a bit. Otherwise you end up with unnecessary sort of edges and lines that may contradict when I've sort of modelled him a bit more. Oh, he's getting better looking. I can't decide whether he's going to have a small nose, a large nose, what size head, what size jaw he's going to have. This is probably going more the way I'm thinking. Again, I've got, and for the pose, angles angled down, shoulders angled down, which means that it's kind of pointing at her, and then it also follows on the line from the rock as well. My little chap is having sort of a leprechaun-y type clothes almost on. When I say his clothes are almost on, his clothes are completely on. They're almost leprechaun-like, is what I meant to say. Bad use of English there. Making her head a little bit higher. I'm not saying that makes her look any better. She's still a bit of an oddball. And what a natural hair colour. Now I'm going to have to do quite a lot of work on this to make it work. Tidying him up a bit more, resolving him a bit more. So you tidied up the line, giving him a firmer line rather. None of this stuff this is all be hopefully improved upon as I go. But lighting him according to the scene lighting, which means that he is lit from the front, whereas she is lit from behind because she's facing him. Again, doing this on their body colour layer, which then will be enhanced by a tone I lay over him. Yeah, drawing's not right yet, but everything in it's good, and everything in good time. I'll sort it. I'll get there. I'm not worrying too much about detail on him because remember, he is quite small in the scene, and if I get too carried away with detailing on him, it may be totally lost and wasted when you pull back to the composition as a whole. Got a sort of tailcoat on, period costume. He's not standing on the rock properly yet. I'll have to sort that out as well. He's a bit he's footless and he's sort of floating, almost embedded in the rock. Oh, that's just showing some of the. You can, when it comes to saving, it offers you the screen size, but you can set it up to about 10,000 pixels, as I mentioned before, maximum, and you can set the resolution as well. I'll demonstrate that better later. Extending the drawing here a little bit so that it does go off the bottom of the canvas. If I remember to do our other arm, that is. Oh, when I do. There we go. Told you so, told you so. Alright. Okay, now it doesn't go off the thing because I've moved it again. Beefing up the shadows. Trying to make it make more sense. Using, even though the colours are quite dark, you do have to define what colour it is, and it is quite a cool shadow. You can see in the colour box, in the colour controls, it's a sort of bluey green colour, which, if I remember correctly, I picked off the canvas colour and then just darkened. Now I'm softening the edges to this. There are several layers of tone, and that's where the highlights are coming from. I've just actually rubbed that back to create sort of highlight, and that nearly works already. Quite a soft highlight in the eye. And this is me trying to put the shadow over him and then realising, because I'm very, very bright, that I'm doing it underneath him. The layer, I've done him near the top of the stack of layers. Haha! Look. Genius. I've found that if I do it over the top, it actually shows. Again, the joys of digital, you can just edit all this stuff. Get it wrong, you can undo it and get it right. Excuse me. Now it'll help her form if I put a bit of what could be described as rim lighting on. It's reflected light from the other side. Like when you take a photo, if a professional photographer was to take a photo of you, quite often they'll use a flash off to one side of the front to fill in from the main light, and that's what that is. That helps round the form if you put a light down one side like that, bearing in mind the colour of the light and where it's coming from, what it's being reflected from. I'm softening her hair a little bit now. To make it a little bit more natural, as opposed to like cardboard. Though cardboard hair is lovely. I've also used the reflected light in the hair as well, don't forget that. I've beefed up the light on the rock a little bit here. So it jumped a little bit there because I forgot to turn the recorder on. Sorry about that. Now you see that zings a lot more. Yeah, that's definitely better. Well, to me it is anyway. And meanwhile, back at our good looking chap in the background, I have yet another go at him. Yes, he's going to be fairly big nosed. I think that will work better. I'm using a fairly small pencil size. He's sort of semi-humanoid. Well, he's humanoid, but he's sort of semi-human, but obviously not completely. I do a little bit of modelling in the tonal layer, in that blue tone that we laid over him earlier. and go back to work on the drawing a bit. Work between the two layers, trying to work out the form, part tonally, part with a line. Poses stayed pretty much the same. Might be an idea. That might not be a bow he's leaning on. I suppose I could have him holding a huge club, but it does look more like he's leaning. The original idea was probably better. He will be clothed. He's not going to be some kind of naked beast, which implied a certain level of civilization, or sort of fairy tale sort of character. Working at the drawing on it. Bum, 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 bum. Oh, it's got a cowl neck. What about that then? Some sort of hat, stroke, made a hat or is it a helmet? I haven't decided. Either way, it shows he's got great fashion sense. Raggedy clothing, because he lives a bit rough in the forest, obviously. Going over darkening cert, giving a little more definition, and modelling by darkening cert, using a darker tone. And that's where we're going to leave it for now, because it's too much to get on one recording. So I'll call a halt to it for the moment, and then we'll resume in what will be imaginatively described as part 2. Hopefully see you there. Bye bye. Hello, this is Nick Harris again. If my voice sounds a bit different, it's because my loving daughter has given me a stinking cold. Yeah, she's nice like that. She likes to share things. Hers develops into laryngitis, so if it goes very quiet halfway through, you'll know that's what's happened here. As you should be able to see, we're continuing where we left off. If you've seen part 1, you'll understand that. If you haven't, this will be very confusing. Just blocking in on layers underneath, and then using semi-translucent layers over the top to build up tone and colour and value. Softening the hair now a bit, because that looked a bit like hemp, a type of string, which is very appealing to some people, but most girls don't seem to like having hair like hemp. Maybe raggedy-handed, but most actual girls don't. One of the things you will find, it can be a bit confusing with Mischief software, is because you have infinite canvas, you don't always unless you save at particular stages and then go back to them, there is a shortcut, Control R. That's on a PC. What is it on a Mac? I can't remember. Command R. And if you press that, that goes back to the original setting, the original view. But make sure you save regularly. Otherwise, if you've changed the view to something you prefer, you'll go back to the one before that, and you'll lose it. And it can be when the file size gets larger, as mine is. No, that's a mistake. The file size hasn't got larger. It's just there's more for the actual PC to cope with in terms of how much it has to remember. Then you will find that maneuvering the layers, zooming and panning actually becomes much more laggy, and so it's harder to smoothly get back to where you were before, the view you had before. So the way to get around that is to save at particular stages with particular names, so that at places that you like, at frames that you like. Meanwhile, back in the actual painting, you can see working back into the rock surface some more. I work all over the place as sort of I feel there's a need. I still don't like that character in the background. See, I'm sort of zooming out a bit there, as we were just talking about. And remember, this is speeded up 12 times, so that took a little bit longer than it appeared on screen. As did that. You can see it's slightly jerky. Then there is lag to it, but this is because, as you saw at the very beginning of the vid cap, I did zoom in a very long way. So this is one of the more extreme ends of the range. You can zoom in further. I won't bother to do that now. Excuse me, I'll be clearing my throat quite a lot during this. Blocking in solid layers and then laying in semi-transparent areas of tone, just to give a sort of more subtlety to the, so it's not dead completely flat. I don't tend to work in really flat areas of colour. I tend to try and vary the colour as I go. It gives things more life. Light playing on things doesn't tend to give you really flat, dead colours. It can do, but it tends not to. It's affected by everything around it. Light bounces all over the place. We're trying to block into some sort of greeny backgrounds here. That will become sort of foresty colours, foliage, that kind of thing. See, I'm not giving up with this character. I'm having another go at him. I'm blocking in a solid sort of neutral tone that I can then sort of work into, just so that he's blocked out, so that he stands out from the background. That's on a separate layer to the drawing, obviously. And there's a tonal layer in between that as well, in between the drawing and the and the base colour. That work I'm doing on the base layer. Just picking out sort of bluey colours. Again, remember the light source. The light source is coming from behind him and behind her. Very sorry. Yeah. And also his hand, as you could probably tell, it's far too close to that tree. I wondered about him leaning on a branch coming off that tree, but that's not what it looks like, because the colour of the bough, the branch, even the tree trunk, I'll get there in the end, it just doesn't work with him. Just doesn't look comfortable. See, I haven't thought him out well enough. But sometimes it's worth persisting with things, because they do work out in the end. You can usually make things work if you keep fretting at it long enough. You just have to be aware of all the general rules, like not having things close to, like having his hand close to that tree part of the tree, unless you intend it to be resting against the tree. It just looks uncomfortable. If it's supposed to be behind it, that would just look wrong. It won't work. It would look uncomfortable. Working at the drawing a bit. Not really much to comment on, really. Enjoy the silence, because I'll be nattering at you again soon. Now, to add colour, I've brought in another layer, which I'm using a highlighter on at very low opacity, so that you can gradually bring hues into the tonal values that you've already added without losing them. Yes, he obviously doesn't shop at very fashionable places. With his kind of leathery tight trousers. I'm picking colours that are more earth colours so that he wouldn't necessarily be as easy to spot as if he, in the woods where he lives, he is supposed to live, as if he was wearing a bright garish colours. So it would make him more effective as a more effective a threat if you can't spot him as easily, despite him probably crashing around like a bear. Adding darker tone to the tonal layer. It's on the same tonal layer. It's not a separate layer. There is a limit to how many layers you can have in Mischief. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I've hit it a couple of times and just it's forced me to make decisions, which is good, in as much as you have to merge a layer down. You have to decide, yes, that's it, and then merge several layers together, and then that frees up another one. It's a good thing. That's a good thing to do anyway. It does make you more decisive. Otherwise, you end up in the scenario I do in other software, where there isn't the same limit on layers, where you've got hundreds of layers and you just get lost all the time. Even when you do name them, if you're scrolling up 100 layers, it still takes time to spot them, even if you've named them. And there is no layer grouping in this yet. Might be something they might think about in the future. A lot of things don't have layer grouping. Sketchbook Pro doesn't have layer grouping. That's something it could do with. Yeah, even if he's not right, I'll start rendering the tree a bit, because I think the tree's going to stay there. Remember, same light source, so light will be down the same side of the tree trunk and the branches. I can see that foliage is going to be fun to do in this, because without the ability to have any sort of hose, some software have sort of image hoses where you can draw a few things and then you can spray that thing over and over again to fill areas quickly. And there's no textures, as we said before, no texture brushes. So foliage will have to be painted the old-fashioned way, kind of in clumps, really. Remember, go for the overall form first. Don't get tempted to do individual leaves, as I do. I get tempted to do stuff like that a lot. That's my OCD coming out. Yeah, see what I said about his hand being too close? Got fed up with that, so I've moved the tree trunk away a bit. Now it just looks like he's missing something. Like he's leaning on something that isn't there. Or he's just got some kind of cramp. Very good. While I think I will get on with something else. So that's why I was doing the tree trunk. The branches, the tree behind him. When you see layers flicking on and off, I'm just checking that I'm working on the correct layer by turning it off, turning it on again. Which, if you watch the IT crowd, might mean something to you. You can see how I haven't blended that texture image that I brought in yet. which will need doing, because really I'd like to extend it down because it looks a bit funny with her hands chopped off, so I want to give her hands, make her more complete. And later on I may have to change the colour of our little pixie, whatever he is, as well, because I can see him not standing out later if he's greens as well. And because I've moved the composition slightly, I'm needing to render the other side of that tree now, which is a chance to sort of just splash some sort of branchy, rooty shapes. You'll notice I didn't bother to take out I'm using Camtasia. It's a screen recording software. This is very, very, very good. And I leave the time in so you get a rough idea of how regularly I save. And also gives you a better idea of how long I've spent on each beat, how long you're seeing. Because it's easy to forget how many hours I will have spent on this. And you think, oh, you did that quickly? Oh yes, of course I did. Doing it like this, well, for me it just takes time. I'm a bit of a slow coach. And that's not including thinking time, where there will be periods where I'm just looking at the image, trying to decide what needs doing on it in my speedy way. That is a valuable thing to do. Stop every now and again and actually look at the image. Maybe go away, grab a coffee or a cup of tea or whatever is your particular tipple, and then come back and look at it fresh, because you will sometimes spot awful glaring gaffes that you need to put right, that you're just too close to when you're working on it. Like when I'm zoomed in like this, I'm working on something like this, and that character behind is still an eyesore, still doesn't work. Bit of a secret, I do change that later. Yes, don't panic if when you're zooming, like you feel like the yellow seems to take longer to transform than the other parts of the image. When I first saw that, I panicked, but just give it a bit of time and it catches up. It's just the software having to think. And also remember, this may have a lot to do with the limits of my own particular system that your system may not suffer from. i5, Windows Home Premium, 8 gig of RAM I think I've got in there, which at the time I got it a couple of years ago seemed to be, oh, that was mega. Now that's a bit wimpy. When you hear what some people have in their systems, it's eye-watering. But mostly this system gets done what I want to get done, so if it ain't broke, don't try and fix it. I can't afford to fix it anyway, so I'll stick with this one for the moment. Adding a bit more colour to her hands, try and make them look like they're not completely dead. Pink around the knuckles, also green reflected where her fingers are turning, where the joints are turning down, just below the knuckles. I've added some green there, so that's picking up off the colours off the ground, but also where the skin goes near bone, it tends to have sort of greeny and purpley tinges. Now of course, because I've extended her downwards, I need to extend the shadow layer downwards as well, which do manually, and then I'll soften bits that seem a bit dark later, because the soft eraser, if you turn the visibility down quite a lot, is really quite a subtle tool. As are all the tools. If you just turn the transparency down on the brush controls, you can have quite subtle effects. Her form is beginning to make a little bit more sense now, with the shadow down the front of her. I will keep tweaking at it, that's the kind of thing I do. I can never know when to leave things alone. But that should be darker in there, so I've darkened that. Probably a bit too much. Got a bit of a Kirk Douglas chin there. I don't know if I'll keep that. Kirk Douglas is Michael Douglas's dad. He was an actor from quite a long time ago, in case you don't know. He is now no longer with us. Excellent actor. He was in Spartacus. Who isn't in this particular scene? See, the yellow jumps every time. So you get used to that kind of thing. Oh, I'm still looking a bit dead. I may have to do something to that. I have to add some light creeping past, I think, to make them a bit more interesting. Do that at some stage. Excuse me, I'm going to cough now. Hello, have I gone into a coma for this bit? Yes. Oh no, I've come back to life. Sorry about that, I don't know what that was. I must have been having a particularly big slurp of coffee then. Which is obviously what has saved me from this terrible cold. Not. Remember, I am doing this voiceover after the fact because I speeded it up, and I couldn't really talk that fast if I speeded that up. Well, it would just sound like a bee going past, which might be an improvement on what you're hearing now, but you wouldn't get the same nuggets of information. Extending the lock. I don't want to bring in any more photo textures if I can possibly avoid it. It's not something I like to do. Really, that's for me, that's a bit of a cop-out. It's not something I do. I like to, where possible, paint everything manually. Going to cough again. I'm going to slurp some tea. I hope you didn't hear that swallowing. Sounds like the tide going out. Still fretting at the rock. Now we're going to have a go at this foliage that I said could be a bit of a problem. I'm just blobbing in general form of it using the marker, the mid-size marker, which actually I find is probably the best one in terms of if you want something that's responsive to size, that one's better than the small one. You can get a finer line with the mid one than you can with the small one. Well, you go down to 2 pixels with the... Hello, I better stop talking about that and talk about this. I don't like the character behind, so he wasn't working, so I've tried scaling him up to see if I can do something for that. And because the software doesn't give you percentages or stuff like that, you just do that by eye. That's not too difficult. That's quite possible. Just line the things up, they move well enough. But it's still, then you've got the problem with him being near the tree again. Dum dum dum. So it doesn't really, it just creates new problems. And he's just as awful a character as before. Now what did I say before? If it isn't working, change it. So I've got rid of him. I've cleared all those layers. And actually, the idea, while it was okay, wasn't great. But I think what I'm going to do now is a slightly better idea. Which is some sort of ogre type characters lurking in the background, using the little girl, yes, that's supposed to be a little girl, as bait to lure this pixie fairy thing so they can capture it. So the character I'm drawing just at the moment, which is supposed to be a female, is just drawing her hand, is going to be letting out the chain that they, because they've captured the little girl, to use as bait, like you would with a worm for a fish, or a maggot for a fish, whatever you use. And they're just letting her out far enough so she can talk to the pixie, whatever it is. I think that's a better kind of fairy tale idea. Now, blocking in their forms over the top of the background at the moment, so I can see them. I will move them down again afterwards, so that because it's easy if you're drawing something going behind something. If you don't follow it through properly, you can draw like disjointed people, and it looks wrong, and you can't work out what it is. There might be another character there, but I think I'll make him bigger. Him, her, it. So they're roughly blocked in now. And then there she will have a metal collar around there, and the chain going off around the back. So the pixie thing can't see it. And obviously it's deaf because it wouldn't hear the clanking. Not a particularly alert pixie. It is only a story, remember? Yes, she goes to wonderful hairdressers, where they include foliage as part of the hairdo. But that's supposed to be part of her camouflage. Whereas they wear raggedy clothing, or she does. Again, part of the camouflage, part of the, but also partly the fact she doesn't really look after her clothes. She doesn't do ironing. So very similar to my clothes then, because I don't really do ironing. Unless necessary, I'll do the odd shirt. Perhaps a pair of trousers now and again. Yes, get rid of that branch because I don't need it now. That was what our failed ogre type thing was going to lean on, but that's not necessary now. What's necessary is a clear view where they're letting the chain out. And you can just be reaching over a sort of nubble in the tree trunk. Yes, that's a made-up word, nubble. Although I'll probably find if I look it up it isn't, and it probably means something rude, so please don't look it up. Giving the tree a little bit more interest. Starting to add a bit of texture to it. Because you're likely to look at it. Well, in fact I want you to look at it because I want you to spot the characters behind. In case you're not really looking. They should be fairly obvious, but if you add it, where you add interest, it tends to draw the eye. It's common sense. So using the same lighting, coming from the right hand side as you look at it. Pick some tones and then sort of lighten them within the colour controls. Maybe warm them a bit, move it more towards the, move it from red to yellow as I get lighter. Otherwise it can just look a bit flat and grey, which it probably does anyway, but it looks a little less so if you sort of vary the tone as you lighten it. Vary the hue as you lighten it, sorry. Sorry about the blackouts. That's where I've jumped from recording to recording, as I said, doing little chunks. Because I have had instances in the past where I've been doing longer chunks and forgotten to save, and then something's gone wrong, it's overloaded the system, and then I've lost the whole recording, which is a bit of a pain. But meanwhile, I better just mention that I am adding tonal layer over the top to the characters in the background to try and give them some more form, and then working back in on the original body colour layer, giving more highlights along the right hand edge to conform with the lighting system that is set up here. Picked a sort of yellowy hue here. I think these two characters are a big improvement on the idiot that was there before. These idiots are more appealing. to me anyway. I will have to bring more colour into them, I think. I don't really want the monochrome. I could I could have a sort of more monochrome background, which does give depth to a scene if you have colour at the front and then more monochrome behind. Aerial perspective of a fashion, after a fashion. Now doing the same with him, improving the drawing, well, trying to rationalise the drawing a bit more. Turn the foliage off so I can actually see him. He's going to have quite a big head, this chap. I don't mean he's big-headed, I just mean he will have a big, sort of heavy head. And a bit of a nasty grin. Eyebrows angled down. The kind of evil look. Working on the body colour layer. As mentioned before, I have added a bit of a hue variation there. Not a huge amount. Same theory as before. They will be wearing mostly sort of earth sort of colours, so they're not too obvious. Otherwise, even a short-sighted pixie would spot them from a mile away. Even if behind a small child on a chain. I always keep going back to try and work on the drawing. Going back, tidying up. I use the eraser equally as much as the painting tools themselves. When I say erasers, because you've got the three choices. And then don't also forget that you can change their opacity, transparency, power, whatever you want to call it. So effectively you've got a lot more than three. That's working on the tonal layer again. Working on the various layers, darting around, trying to make the figures come together a bit more. Now, to me, it's not a problem that his leg is echoing the curve of her spine at the front, and actually in line with it, because it's part of him hiding. The whole point is he is hiding behind a tree and hiding behind things. And it's still fairly obvious if you look that that's what it is. That's his leg behind her. Making the rendering a bit more chunky, a bit more bold. He's actually got a type of hat because he really is fashion conscious. And more of the same. See, my voice has gone a bit more now. Thought I'd give him a sort of corset-like thing to try and hold in his belly. Just trying to make everything about him really attractive. I change and adapt things all the time as I go, as I feel they are working or not working or can be improved upon. You have to respond to what else is going on in the picture to make sure that if something's working on its own, it also has to work with the other elements of the image. Otherwise, it will just jar. Now, if I'm sensible, I will pull back again in a minute. Zoom out, I mean. So you can have a better idea. Oh, there I go. Oh, psychic, eh? It's almost like I did this before and then did a voiceover afterwards.
tightening up the tree so that it's got the same sort of level as rendering as the figures, because it's at the same sort of spatial point in the image. She is actually in contact with the tree, just leaning against it, reaching around it, so it needs to read as the same sort of level of detail. Again, otherwise it will jar. Whereas that tree on the left where I'm working now, I want to make seem closer, so I will have to add more detail to that. More depth and bigger sort of pattern, bigger fissures, bigger grain, whatever you want to call it. Bigger bark, like a Great Dane's bark. No, I'm messing, obviously, different sort of bark, different meaning. Yeah, I want to extend the foliage a bit more. It's a bit of a lopsided tree at the moment. Not that you don't get lopsided trees, you do. Just like you get people with lopsided faces, you get trees with lopsided leaves. Adding a bit of colour variation into the leaves. A bit more browny yellows in there. Making a few. Remember I said about trying to work on the thing as a whole shape rather than trying to think about individual leaves? Well, in your mark making, you have to remember that the whole thing does have an overall volume, even though it's made up of a lot of components. No, this isn't a blackout. This is me putting a layer over the top with reduced opacity. This is how I would work in software that have layer blending modes. I like to lay a unifying layer of shadow over that you can then work that into, cutting away with, in this case, with the eraser. If it had multiply blending mode, I could just use a lighter colour. But to try and define an overall lighting pattern, this colour is a bit dark, a bit too strong. I will have to knock it back, but I leave it at this strength at the moment. Yes, that was a crash. I pushed it too hard and managed to crash the software. Now don't be alarmed, I've managed to crash ArtRage, I've managed to crash Sketchbook Pro, I've managed to crash Painter. It doesn't take too much to crash Painter. I'm probably being unkind, I'm talking history, but I've crashed all these software, so don't be alarmed. It came to the limits of my system, and it normally is to do with you've run out of RAM, and it goes, oh, I can't cope, and falls over. But that's the only crash I've had. But I thought it's all part of the experience. So that's what happened. I just didn't lose anything because I've been saving regularly. Well, maybe about a couple of brush strokes, but that was all. So now I'm back. I've zoomed in a bit because I need the contrasts in the foreground to be more pronounced than in the background, because that will what make it come forward. Yes, I'm not happy with the little pixie character. He's okay, but he needs a lot more crisping up and being made much more attractive. So you look at him, because he is like the focal point, really. So what everybody is concentrating on is what she's trying to communicate with, though she hopefully seems to be sort of slightly wide-eyed under threat. And the characters in the background are all looking towards this. This is the focus of their attention as well, so I will have to make him better. So this is all working with the eraser. I think you can see on the right, the one that's selected is a soft eraser, set at a small size. I think the opacity is fairly low as well. I want that kind of luminosity of the eyes when the light hits the eye from the side and sort of almost comes through the corner at the front. Makes the light almost glow. Makes the eye almost glow. Sorry. With a strange light. I have a feeling I'm going to have to lighten her face later. It's a bit too dark to make her pop more. Sounds very unpleasant, doesn't it? Making a small girl pop. You have to squeeze really hard. You know what I mean. I'm talking about the contrasts and colours to make those pop, so that it seems to be in front of the things that are actually on the same image plane. It's a visual trick. I do quite a lot of sort of tidying up of this because it's important to get the eye is very good at reading little subtle things like this. If there are untidy edges, it will notice and it just won't leap forward as much. So I want really crisp sort of edges at the front. I will go and do some rim lighting, little layer, and add body colour over the top. I call it rim lighting. See, but I'm still working with the eraser on the on that dark layer at the moment, which is a sort of dark bluey purple colour. I saved the colour. I made a point of saving the colour so that if I overdo it, then I can get, if I erase something away, I can go back, and that I didn't want to erase, I can go back and fix it. Otherwise I'd have to match the colour somehow. Which you can do by putting the opacity back up to 100% and sampling from that, but that's just tedious to do. I don't want to keep doing that. It's easier to just save the colour. I'm not a great colourist, as you would probably realise. I do drawings and colour them in. Same as I did when I was a 6-year-old. And some people would say I haven't improved since then, but they're just being really unkind, I hope. This probably isn't particularly exciting to watch. If anybody is watching. Hopefully I will pull back again in a minute and see the overall thing, because it's very easy to get tied up with details. And you do need, as if doing a real painting, to step in and out. There we are, that's a bit of that rim lighting I was talking to you about. So here's a layer, I've added a layer over the top. I think I've named it rim light. Or top light or something like that, that's what I normally name it. And you can just go and crisp up edges. And it also then means that if there's any pencil lines that are actually interfering with how crisp it looks, you go over the top of them as well. I'm a bit of a line person, but sometimes you need to get rid of them. Our old art teachers used to say there are no lines in nature, only edges. It's a question of how soft they are. There we are, I've pulled back a bit now. Now I'm trying to make a pattern of lights and darks that will allow the scene to read. It's all a bit too chiaroscuro dramatic at the moment. It's like she's there at night. I don't want her to be there at night. I want her to be there at the daytime in dappled sunlight, or dappled light anyway. Magical forest type stuff. You can see how I haven't worried about the edges. It's like doing a painting on a bit of watercolour paper. You bleed the tones over the edge and then I will crop it later. I will frame it up within the Mischief window to export it, making sure that there aren't any of those raggedy edges on show. Unless I wanted them, of course. I don't think I do. I've also a feeling that whatever is under the tool palette on the right hand side will probably also show when I do this, the save screen. So there's going to be some dead bits at the side. What you can actually see is what you will get, that shape. So you will have to crop it to that at the end, I think. It's quite likely I've missed something. You can probably fold that palette away, but I haven't noticed how to do that yet. As I said, this software is new to me as well. Going over more generally with the brush a bit bigger. Now framing it up a bit better within the window. Gradually getting a bit more light, a bit more interesting. I will most likely lighten once I've done the cutting away that I want to do, I will actually lighten the opacity of the layer. So it's not quite so doom, gloom, dark. Doesn't need to be really. Having said that, I then also am going over and darkening some areas a bit more on the layer over the top. Obviously, to be allowed to have this extra layer, I've done a bit of merging of some of the layers below, because I'd used up the quota of layers allowed. Now I've turned it off so that I can see what I'm doing with the actual modelling and rendering underneath. Yes, I don't want it to be quite so Spartan in the background. I want some foliage, some grass, some leaves, that kind of thing. In the background, I will imply areas of foliage, hopefully without having to go into drawing and rendering each leaf. That would just be tedious and time consuming and a waste, really. I don't like to see everything rendered. Ooh, excuse me. It's the cold, it's making me do all sorts of nasty things. Well, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. See, I'm just kind of indicating loose shapes. Again, I'm back working on the overall tonal layer that I laid over the top. Now I quite like how the figures in the background are kind of less distinct now. But at the same time, I want her to come forward more because she's at the same sort of gloom level as them, and really, in an ideal world, I would make their meeting, the pixie and the girl, kind of their meeting kind of magical. Because I don't know how many of you had actually met pixies. I haven't, but to me that would seem kind of magical, and it needs to appear so. Whether I'll manage that within the time frame I've got, I don't know. But either way, it needs to be less doom and gloom at the front. Yes, I will add dappled sunlight on the... It's supposed to be like forest floor. They're under trees, so why not dappled light on the floor? Whether it's sunlight or not, or just light, dappled light. I'm also, excuse me, cutting away. No, I'm not cutting away at the moment. I'm adding. I did cut away bits of the foliage, but on another layer over the top, I'm adding a certain level of lighter leaves, which I'm taking a bit more time to get more shapes in there, so it makes more sense, reads better as actual foliage as opposed to an amorphous blob with sort of funny shapes in it. I want you to understand it is supposed to be a sort of tree type thing, bush, whatever you want to call it, a plant, big plant, a big nasty thing is hiding behind. Yes, I want to lighten his shirt. While I want them in the gloom, I do want them to read better than that, because they're not supposed to be very good at hiding. These aren't Mensa candidates. These aren't sort of university graduates. These are supposed to be sort of dimbos, really. And I'm making his sort of jacket a kind of a red sort of colour, and adding a bit more warmth to his skin colour. I don't want to make him totally green faced, or her totally green faced, so I'm adding colour to them with another layer using the highlighters, which I'm not too careful about the edges, and then I go back and I tidy them up with the eraser afterwards, is what I'm doing now. It's a good way of adding colour. If you do the tonal thing and then go back over, you can add the colour with the highlighters later. I tend to use the lightest one and also at low opacity, because I'm a bit of a cowardy custard. I like to do things slowly. I'm not leaping with wellies at the deep end. Wouldn't recommend leaping in with wellies at the deep end anyway, because it's really hard to swim with them on. I haven't tried it, I just can imagine. I'm not going to try it. You can't see it, but this is actually me cutting away on the tonal layer again. You can see you can actually do a lot of work on the tonal layer, and it's quite, as I said, quite unifying. It's a good way of unifying a scene. It gives an overall colour balance to the scene, because suddenly all the shadows have elements of that same colour, which is good in one way but also limiting in another, because it can also be a bit flattening. So you then have to try and, I did when I was laying that colour down, though it went by too fast, I did put some colour variation in, some slight colour variation, because I don't like, as I said before, light is complex, bounces all over this, picks up colours. I did try and add a few colour variations into it. I was using the Conte crayons because they're almost effectively the soft edge tools in this that you can use like an airbrush, particularly if you use lower opacity again. This is on a layer over the tonal layer. Well, it's between two tonal layers, and I'm actually adding a few body colour highlights. I think it'll be a combination of using the pencil, or is it called the pen? I can't remember. I think it's a pencil, and the markers when I want bolder marks. Now, when I say bolder marks, that's nothing to do with some kind of mispronunciation of a Harry Potter character. Oh, that's the usual thing I get on my system, whereby every now and again it tells me that I've got no memory left and I have to turn to the basic colour, Windows basic colour. That's my system. Hopefully you don't get that on yours. That's just how badly I've got my system set up. Wallop. Suddenly I've put a bit of colour on the floor. Thank goodness for that. Yes, I lost a bit of recording there. When I say lost, idiot me, forgot to turn the recorder on. I thought I had and I hadn't. I think the word is Burke you're looking for. Anyway, I haven't done anything major. All I've done is block colours onto the floor, using lots of little strokes and some warm sort of autumnal colours, ochres, siennas, the browns, so to look sort of forest flory. I didn't want it dead flat. I thought about using a photo texture, decided against that, and as I said before, it's not my favourite way to do things. I'd rather paint it if I can. But just painting blobby marks on the floor like that, I will probably add a little bit of pencil detail in certain places just to give accents and little accents here and there. Probably a couple of highlights over the top later on as well. Maybe a few fronds of plants growing up. This is all if I have time. I need to make this rock ping a bit more. It's kind of okay, but it's not coming forward enough. It needs to be forward more. You may also notice that the guy by the tree on the left has suddenly got a much bigger head. I decided that if the tree is to look closer, I need to make the character behind it feel much closer as well, and give a feeling of the scale of the nasties that are trying to catch this little pixie. So he is considerably bigger now. Obviously not fully resolved yet. We're getting there slowly. We're getting there. Now I'm lightening. I said I was going to lighten this. She's just too dark. It's too grim at the front. I'm starting to... Well, I thought I was starting to like. No, actually I'm trying to... First I'm trying to change the colour a bit with a sort of turquoisey blue. I've warmed it up from a purpley blue to a turquoisey blue. That's not necessarily doing the trick. It's made her hair look a bit odd. I might have to sort that later. But I know I do also do quite a bit of erasing with the soft eraser set to low opacity. Because I've tried it with the tone over the top, and I don't think it works. For me, it's not working properly. This is all personal taste stuff now. I'm trying like picking out details, see if I can do it just with details, but it's just not enough. She's looking more and more grim again. More hard edge, like, I don't know. Someone who's had a very hard life. Oh, suddenly I'm pale again. She'll have to be a bit darker than that. She'll have to have a bit more to her than that. But it was just too dark before. Again, she looks much older than a small child. But actually, she's never was supposed to be a small child as such. But she definitely is more forward than she was. So this is a partial success. You'll notice, if I stop coughing, that the foliage in the background has developed a bit more as well. It works a bit better. On the left-hand side, anyway. I've given her light eyelashes now, as if that's going to solve everything. And a light eyebrow. You know how people with really fair hair, their hair almost looks silver in the sunlight? Well, my hair looks silver now, but for all the wrong reasons. I used to have dark hair. So much to do, so much to do. It's all a matter of juggling and tweaking. And this is the vague way I work. Well, that was really handy. My USB port at the front just fell inside my computer. So I've had to unplug the headphones and speakers and scrabble around under the desk and plug them in the back. Really not handy at all. It's obvious how much I keep my PC in a really good state of repair. I have to sort that a bit later. Meanwhile, trying to add a bit more interest to the Pixie character. As I said, he does need to be zinged forward somehow. I don't know if yellow stripes are going to do it. It's going to need more than that, I think. And also, there's been another new development in as much as Imagine Effects magazine, who this is also tied in with, have informed me that really they'd like a workshop to go in the magazine to accompany this, which is not something I've been preparing. Whoops. So obviously a breakdown in communication there. Never mind, we'll sort it. But what it does mean is that one of their team has supplied me a layout, and now there's going to be a part 3 to this, where I will adapt what we've got to fit the layout, which really is quite good because it's in keeping with the theme of the magazine, which is illustration. And this will give a practical application to this image, which really I've just been doing for fun. Thinking that it was just going to be a video capture in the download section of the magazine. Not in the magazine, on the associated site. So, I'll tinker on a little bit more with this. And then at the beginning of the next section, I'll show you the layout. And then we will carry on. And you'll see how I crop the image and adapt it and then sort of print it out so that it can be used within the mag. I'm extending down a bit because I need to. I was doing this anyway, but since I've had the word from IFX, this makes more sense to do this. It's a nice layout. I like what they've come up with it. Dan there is really good, very talented. Came up with it very quickly. I wanted to extend it slightly right to give them a few more options, but we won't be using that. That will be included in the files that go with the workshop. And obviously you're seeing it here, so it's not wasted. It just helps me get a better perspective on the scene as a whole, and also ties in with the big plus of this software, where you just keep expanding the canvas. Of course, that's a plus and minus, because the more you do, the more time it takes. But why not? Extending the floor plane a bit. That again is just using body color on the back layer. This is after I had to drop that JPEG back in, remember, after the layer went AWOL. But in fact, I think it's turned out to be a plus, because I think this is actually better now. It's helped me resolve a few things. Pulling back is always a good idea, like standing back from a canvas when you're actually painting real painting. This gives you a better idea of the whole. So easy to get tied up with details, especially with digital. And with this software where you can zoom and zoom and zoom, it will be a danger, so always be aware of that. Make it a strength, not a weakness. Anyway, I'll just do a bit more cutting away of the tonal layer over the top, the shadow layer. And then, pretty much, I'm going to stop for now. And we will move on to part 3, which wasn't planned. I wasn't planning on a part 3. But it makes sense to do that now. It'll be a much shorter section. But hopefully, you'll be interested enough to see that, because it should be different from just the general waffling and daubing. The waffling will have more focus. Hard to imagine it having less focus. So anyway, this is the end of part 2. Hopefully see you in part 3. Bye! Hello, this is Nick Harris with part 3 of the Introduction to Mischief, and in the last part, if you saw that, you will understand that we have had our focus put on the fact that this image is going to be used in the magazine now with a workshop. So they have provided me with a layout, which is this. Now when you're preparing for print, not only do you have to try and make it crisper and a bit sharper, but there will be constraints. For instance, there is the gutter. That's the bit down the middle where the staples or the join or the glue or whatever hold it together goes. And you mustn't put anything important there because it'll be sucked in, it could be compromised. So you have to avoid that. And also we're going to have to crop the image to this shape now, which, considering the red shape there, considering that there aren't really measuring tools in Mischief, it's going to be interesting. We'll work out how to do that. There will be a way. My plan is to import a JPEG of this layout and overlay it as best I can, match it to it, and then set up a rectangle to give me a guide with rough edges of how far I can go. But then I will take it out of that and put it into an image manipulation software. In my case, it'll be Photo Plus 17x7 because I don't use Photoshop. I won't pay Adobe the ridiculous amount of money they charge. There we are. I have imported the JPEG and sizing it, trying to match it. The problem with it is there's obviously been a slight distortion when it was made into JPEG, and I can't quite match it up, but I'll get as near as damn it, as close as I can. And then I'll make sure I give enough bleed when I crop it, that the guides at Imagine Effects magazine, where this is going to go, can move it about a bit and get it just how they want it. Okay, now that's me drawing the box around it. That's on a separate layer I'll put over the top, and I'll probably give myself a little bit of bleed as well. I'm going to mark the gutter in so I remember to avoid that area with anything too detailed, although at this stage in the composition I don't think that's going to be a problem. Just turning it off and again to see how close I am. You can see there's a slight bump. Excuse me, still got the silly cough. I've had a considerable bump, so I'll have to leave a buffer to make sure that's a bleed off area, to make sure that they can move it around and get it how they want it. Drawing another box around the outside just to remind me to do that. I'll probably leave more bleed than that, but that's what I'm doing for the moment. I've written gutter in at the bottom very lightly, though you can't see it. Now, I'm trying to see by using the export functions how many what the dimensions of the thing are of the selection I've got there. If you make a selection, you can just export the selection, so that can give you an idea of what space you're working with. But really, that's a bit of a fudge workaround. It's one of the things I will ask the developers at Mischief to look into, having some measuring tools. They're very approachable. I think the plan is to have a dedicated forum where you can leave suggestions and stuff like that. The other thing that is going to be needed, according to Imagine Effects, and because of the revised composition, obviously with the composition being cropped like this, it makes it work differently, or not work. And they'd like me to put a character in bottom left, behind the rock. I suggested maybe an army of pixies, which would then sort of change the dynamics of the composition and actually what's going on. But they'd prefer another ogre coming up there, so I'm going to do that. That was me just crisping up the back edges of the ogre in the background, and adding a bit of rock detail. I'm fiddling at the moment. I'm sort of trying to think about how to approach the ogre. It'll probably be reaching up, something like that, an arm and a hint of a head, but I don't just want to have a little hand creeping in at the bottom. I did that in a competition ages ago, so I want to do something different. So I want to have it bolder, but I'll have to make sure it's in shadow so it doesn't take over too much. It'll make it much more of a threat to the pixie in terms of the story and stuff. As you see, I'm just fiddling here and there and everywhere while I think. I'll get to it in a minute. Right, pull back a bit. Are we going to go now? Yep. I called it New Guy, and I've started drawing with a light colour just so it'll show up, because it's quite a dark picture at the moment. So it just makes sense to use a light colour when I'm planning. And probably that kind of arm. Excuse me again. There's going to be a lot of that doing this. In this cough fest. I'm wondering about him having a net, but that's going to get in the way of the guy behind. That doesn't work very well. You see, I transformed the drawing a bit, moved it away from the gutter. It is still too close to the gutter. I don't like how close it is to the gutter, but if I pull back a little bit, it'll line up with the figure behind, which I don't want. And I don't want to pull back further than that, really, because then you lose his head. It's a juggling job. But I also want him to be quite bulky, quite big. I want you to get an idea of how big these guys are compared to the poor little pixie and the little girl that they've kidnapped to use as bait. Oh, they're nasty, these guys. They're kind of fun, but they're nasty. They have evil intent, even if they're a bit inept. It's that kind of villain. Blocked in some base colours on a layer below, obviously, as you can see. A sort of neutrally darkish orangey skin colour. That will change a lot. I've changed the colour to be drawing with, now that I've got a base colour to work over, because you can see the drawing now. You couldn't see it before. You wouldn't be able to see it before. And I will get rid of all the green eventually. That will go. It's just practicalities. You've got to work with what you've got. If something's dark and you can't see it, then work light. While you're in the planning phase, you're going to get rid of it later, so it doesn't matter. Adding a bit of volume to him. Trying to pick out sort of knuckles and the tendons in the back of the hand. Adding colour to the base colour, different hues. Liven it up a bit. More pink around the knuckles, more grey around the other bony bits. Sorry, green. I meant green. It's got a go in it, but the ending's different. Green. More of a greenish hue. That doesn't mean it's green. It means it's more green than pink, as the other tones are. It's all comparative. It's that relativity thing. Colour theory and all that. I'll pretend I know about colour theory. Going to be quite a lot of tidying up and fettling going on here. Excuse me, I'm going to cough again. Still trying to get the drawing better. It's not great. And because I'm working from comparatively quite a long way away, like I've stepped back from the canvas, I've zoomed out, I'll have to go back in later and tighten it up, because the girl I zoomed in on, so her edges are quite crisp, and if his hand doesn't work, either I deliberately make it out of focus because it's in front and it's not on the same plane, or I have to make it as crisp because it's got to be able to compete with it. It's got to make sense with the girl in terms of rendering, I mean. Trying to define these sort of very coarse knuckles. Working very broadly still. It's probably going up a little bit too vertically, I think, at the moment. The forearm, I mean. Though I also don't want it to be echoing the sort of 45-degree angle of the rock, which really needs bringing forward more. It needs crisping so that it separates it from that tree behind. I might be able to do that by making the bottom left corner just above the ogre's forehead and just behind that tree trunk. If I make that light, I think that should help that. It's very dark at the moment. It's all fairly similar tonal range. So that's why it's like the tree disappears into the murk, which is okay, but I would work better if I'll sort that out later. Trying to define the planes of how the light is going to hit the hand. Because the hand is curved, the knuckles are curved over the rock, the fingers are lit more than the back of the hand is. But I still want to have some definition in the back of the hand. As I said, it's really not a great drawing, so... Now the colours might seem quite bold, but I will overlay a shadow over that later, so I've made them quite bold so they will actually show up when there's a shadow over them as well. Otherwise it would all be lost in a bit of a fog, a bit of a tonal fog. Very technical term there, just made up of course. Now on a hand this scale, then you will be able to see fingernails. I'm not a great proponent of doing fingernails and stuff if you really don't need to. Mind you, I've done the girl's eyelashes, so if I don't do his fingernails, it's a bit of favouritism really, isn't it? Almost like I don't like ogres. That makes a bit more sense in terms of the anatomy, I suppose. Still not great. I want to add some veins and things in there to make him look a little bit more muscled. A bit more threatening, rather than just big and clumsy. The other thing that you will notice is that now I've got quite warm colours on his arm. The pixie is more and more lost. Even though he's a dark shape against a slightly lighter background, he really needs to ping more. You should look at him almost first, because everyone else is looking at him, so you should look at him. But at the moment, all I'm looking at is his forearm. Ping! Now, that's too much, but see how it fits more in if I knock it back. I might end up with something like that, actually. Very dark is quite nice. I'll fiddle around in between and change it, no doubt, and mess it up, but I quite like it very dark like that. This is me just cutting back into the overall shadow layer I've got on top. That's probably where I should leave it, but I won't because I'm me. I can't leave things alone. Fiddle, 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 kill it, kill it, kill it, kill it, kill it. See, told you. Some people just don't know when to stop. Idiot. Idiot. Kind of works, I suppose, after a fashion. That's adding accent shadows on another layer. At the moment I've got a few layers left of the quota that you can have. Now see how when you slap some, this is on working on the rim light layer, how when I put some of those accents in, it really gives more volume to it, makes it turn away from you, because you're working with planes. I don't mean the flying in the air type, you know what I mean. The angles, the surfaces. The back of his hand is one surface, and as the forearm and arm turns away from you, that's another plane. So it will be affected by light differently. In this case, I've got reflected light going on in other areas, so it makes sense, particularly as it's on the rock, to have it on the side of his arm as well. It just explains what that is that you're seeing, in case you didn't know. Yeah, it's going to be another good looking one. You will be reassured. I'm not using a mirror for this, though I'm probably in the same sort of category of beautifulness. I could have just said beauty then, couldn't I? Beautifulness. What's that? Now, this is me just showing that off camera, I did a bit more work modelling up his forearm. Put those veins in I told you about. Now I know we're not going here, or we shouldn't be going here. This shouldn't actually come into the picture at all. But it pays to overshoot. If they did decide to pull back, I'd like to have a little bit of, well, quite a lot of buffer, bleed, overshoot, whatever you want to call it, that they can go into. But also it helps me understand the character if I do things like this. Understand the volume of the character. I don't want to understand his motivations. His motivations seem fairly straightforward. I want that pixie. Or in a bigger society, we want that pixie, because there's a number of them. Turning the shadow layer back on, you can see his hand is really it's too zingy, isn't it? Now I need to either lighten the rock, or I need to do something to knock about that shadow. It's not right. No, take it out, put it back. Take it out, put it back. Which you can do with digital, of course. You can fiddle with it till you feel it's working. To me, it's still not quite working at the moment. I quite like that rim lighting. That's a bit bold. See, I'm going to try next, but it also the actual way the volumes work don't, as it were. The rock now has, because of how he is lying on it, seems to have become flattened. So I'm trying to give it a bit more form down the bottom by his elbow there, give a sort of ledge that he could be leaning on, and at the front there, trying to define that to give that more importance, bring that forward more. I know it's further away, but give it an edge so it reads better. I didn't describe that, so it reads better. See, I'm trying to define some edges here and there. That was me turning the wrong layer on. Didn't really need to see the layout again. Here's that shadow I told you I wanted. I did that using a highlighter so that I could work on it separately, because I've still got enough layers to do that. I'll still take it too far, because I always do. I can't stop myself. I'm a compulsive. Now, I have pulled in because working, as I said earlier, I was working from quite a long way out. I zoomed out, and when you pull in, it actually looks pretty grim. So this is me tidying up the line a bit more. I will also tidy up the rim light a bit later, because when you pull in on that also looks pretty grim. And you'll notice the chap in the background has a little bit of work on him as well. That happened off camera, just to save time in this vid cap. He's not great yet, but he's a bit more, makes a bit more sense. See, this is line work on the knuckles, because I can get away. She's got line work on her. He can get away with this sort of line work on him. There will also be work on the body colour layer as well. Those creases come round too far. I'll have to knock them back later. On the coming round from the palm at the bottom under his little finger there. Ooh, don't like them. What am I doing? Why am I leaving them there? Well, just go and sort them. Go and sort them. I'm not going to do it. I'm going to have to do it later. Right. Now that's crisper. That's crisper. No, but now I've got to go in and make the shadow layer work with it a bit better. Because where I was crisping up, I was also changing some of the shapes slightly. This is working on the various shadow layers. Remember, there's several that affect this. There's the overall shadow layer. There's the shadow layer that was dedicated to being just over this arm. And him, I mean, over this ogre. See, and that's now I have crisped up that rim light. Doesn't that make a difference? But I also crisped up the rim light in the back, and I did it a bit much to start with. But I've tried to soften the one on him a little bit, so that it doesn't compete too much with him. And I don't think he does sit back more now. There's quite a strong red light on the character at the front, and not on the character at the back, behind him. But I also decided there's a problem with the rock competing with the background still, just by her hip, in there, where I'm erasing now. I'm trying to get the tone out of there. I'm just checking the layers to see which bit of tone is on where. Now I'm going to cut that away, because I want the rock to have a clean edge, so that it comes forward. At the moment it's competing with all the shadows and the similar tones that are there. That's no good. I need that gone. But I also noticed that the shadow for the tree wasn't actually right. There was no shadow for the tree trunk. There were these. It would have worked if the sun was really, 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 really high, like almost directly overhead. But that wasn't the idea. It is slightly to one side, off to the right. So I want, and that's quite a tall tree trunk, so it would throw a shadow. And in fact, I can use that to define the floor plane. That diagonal coming from the base of the tree, where the female, that's supposed to be a female, ogre is hiding in the background. Now the shadow from that comes across and goes under the front of the rock, and that actually, to me, works better. I'll have to do work into it to add a bit more subtlety, but that makes more sense. And as you see, I've lightened a bit behind as well. What layer was that I added? Oh, yes. What did I say about him not working? But he needs brightening up. I'm changing his green coat to a red coat. That's not a Butlins red coat, just a red coat, to see if that's going to help at all. It might be because he's in so much shadow that it's not going to make a lot of difference. But it's got to help a little bit to lift him from the green, because if he's green and the background's green, that's not going to help. You'll also see there's a kind of haze now. I've added, in between, just above the base layer, I've added in a lightening, a low opacity lightening, a very light sort of greeny colour, sort of green-white, to knock it back more, to see if he's dark, then the background needs to be lighter if he's to zing. It's all, what makes things zing is contrast. Now this may or may not work, and I'll probably end up fiddling around and changing it again later, but that's what I'm trying for the moment. And then I'm just erasing it where it comes over the rock, because the rock is on the background layer at the moment. Because all the flattening and that I have done, that has ended up on the background layer. I need to do, now quickly moving, I need to define the chain around her neck and what is going on, and it's not clear what is around her neck at the moment. So I'm just clarifying on the appropriate layers that there is a torque, T-O-R-Q-U-E, around her neck, which is chained on, a metal torque that she cannot get out of. And I've put a few glints, a sort of suitably coloured glints on the chain just disappearing behind her hair. And I'm beefing up some of the lines using the Conte crayon, because it's nice and soft, and it'll beef them up without making them too crisp. Now, time for a review. What do we need to do? This lot. I need to get the foliage working in the background tree. The spatial relationship between that tree where the other ogre is hiding and the rock at the front doesn't work. Central focal character still doesn't ping enough. I need to finish the chain and make sure it goes back because it's very black at the moment. I need to resolve all their hands better, and the shadow pattern needs to go back in here because otherwise it doesn't make sense that there's suddenly this bold spot where there's no bland spot, clear spot where there's no shadows. Can't even keep up with myself. What I've done is taken it off, and where these circles are, I've beefed up the colour, foreground and behind, to warm things up a bit. And in keeping with that, I have also tried to warm up her shadow colour, because I'm hoping that will isolate her and bring her forward a bit, as it has done with the ground in the foreground. Well, hopefully anyway. I did that on a layer over the top, so that I could get rid of it if I wanted to. It was kind of a tester thing. This is why I like layers. You can try things out, and if they don't work, you can get rid of them. You will notice that I have added those shadows back in. That was on the list of things I said I was going to do. What I've done so far is kind of additional and will hopefully support those things. Now this is the scene. I hope you can see with the shadow here a bit warm, the shadow around her shoulder and that a bit more warmed up. It places her better in the space because the reflected light from that sort of sienna floor makes more sense. And now it's progressed a tiny bit more. I've done a bit more on the foliage in the background. That was also on the list. It needs tidying up a little bit more, and also in the very background I've added some hinted at some detail of trees in the far distance. Again with sort of yellowish hue, then it ties in with the yellow on the left, and that gradually fades away towards as it goes towards the right. And added some bits of grass at the bottom, nothing detailed at all there, just to bring a sort of foreground into it. Now you can, I found out, yes I asked, and you can toggle the tool palette away by Control T with a PC. Now what I'm doing now is I've saved it as a layered file, and now I am exporting it at the maximum 10,000 pix resolution at 300 dots per inch. Excuse me, I'm going to cough. So that I can have the biggest file possible to work with in my image manipulation software, which is, as I explained, Serif Page Plus X7. And what I will be doing there is pretty much similar to what I did before in this software, trying to drop the cropped version of the layout over the top of the picture so that I can see how to crop it. It's still going to be a bit rough and ready. This saving actually took over 5 minutes. Now I've speeded it up 12 times so that you don't go completely to sleep. Yeah, if you're not already asleep. Boo! Are you asleep? No. And good and well done if you're not. I don't know how you stayed awake. Oh, right. See, 5:58 it took. Now I have, having saved that file, as I said, I've created a new file and imported the saved JPEG in, where I find out that I should have tidied up her face a bit more with some of the highlights. I warmed up the highlights to contrast with the sort of purples of the shadows, more sort of orangey colour, which looked fine when I was pulled out a bit, and looked really grotty when I pulled in, so I'm just smoothing them out a little bit. It's still not great, but in the context of the picture as a whole, I mean, I will work until I run out of time. I won't get to do everything I want to do, but that's pretty much standard. That's par for the course, goes with the job. Otherwise I'd never finish pieces of work, they'd never be done. Quickly doing that chain, I said. So I'm doing these, as you can see, on a couple of layers over the top, a couple of layers of colour and a layer for drawing. Lightening bits in there, trying to get his foot on the ground. Placed better on the ground, I mean. Tidying up her hand a bit, while actually strengthening the modelling in it, although I don't think I make a very good job of this. I've tightened up her face a little bit. I don't like the far side of the guy's waistcoat as well. I'm going to be having a go at that. The ogre in the background, I mean. It's just hanging funny. I want his belly sort of protruding more, so I'm going to cut that back a bit. But at the moment I'm still on the chain. Here we go. This actually relates to something that happened earlier where when I try to press Control R to go back to the original view, it in fact lost a layer. And there was a background layer with all the sort of work on it. So all I did was go back to a previous version and turned everything else off but that layer, and then dropped it back as a JPEG. This happened ages ago. I just forgot to mention it at the time because it didn't prove to be a biggie, and I mentioned how I think it actually helped me. And you probably wondered what on earth I was talking about. Well, now you know. That was it. Apparently that is something that can happen. They've reported, I was talking to the, as I said, the lovely lady who is one of the developers. She said, yes, that can happen. They're working on finding out what causes that, and they will sort it. This is what these teams do. You have to report bugs. All software has bugs and funny idiosyncrasies, idiosyncrasies that they do. And this is one of theirs at the moment, and they'll sort it. See, by zooming right in again, you will also notice that zooming in and out is much crisper now. By crisper, I mean smoother and faster, and that's because there's only a couple of layers now. It's not the system isn't having to remember anything like as much as it did before, because I've been working and working and working and working, and it was remembering everything. With the almost limitless undos, it has to remember what to do. So obviously that would slow down any system, wouldn't it? Well, in my experience it would. So her hands have been one of the bugbears. I'm trying to make them a little bit, give them a little bit more form. Again, as I said before, just working on a couple of layers over the top. Just don't need to add any more than that. I'll do it all the finishing off work I'm going to do on those particular layers. This is like the home stretch. Again, I should leave it there, shouldn't I? That's kind of working. Now I'll kill it. It still looks kind of flat there, doesn't it? I'm trying to angle her. I've added another layer over which I'm going to add a layer of using the highlighter. He says bumbling along, forgetting the words. It's early in the morning here, I'm very tired. Well, that gives it a little bit more form, I suppose. Her hands are a little bit chunky. Now I'm just sort of tidying up around them because they're a bit sort of blurry. I don't want to really draw attention to them, but I do want them to look kind of like hands. That'd be nice. Not like fuzzy mittens. Now this is one of the last things I'm going to do, I think. I talked about this, although I'm not adding leaves. I'm just adding some sort of fronds of grass to give a bit more interest to the floor. Make it seem like the sun is sort of catching certain things in the pools of light. And that's probably where I'm going to leave it. Excuse me. Had to get a last cough in. Apart from this, I've knocked back that bit of rim lighting, and I'm also going to just do a little bit more tidying on him, because when you can zoom in as easily as this now, I wasn't doing as much zooming and panning before, because when it gets sluggish it's a bit tedious. But now it's all sweetness and light again. I can zoom in, zoom out, and not get grey hairs while I'm waiting. Well, not get any more grey hairs while I'm waiting. Not that they show. That's all I've got now. See, beefing up the stripes a bit. That will help his definition a bit. But do you see what I mean about the resolution? This is zoomed right in. In other software, you'd be even working with like a 1 pixel or 2 pixel brush. It would look pixely. Nope, don't get that with this software. Now, this is me exporting. Final thing I do, and you have to spot the deliberate mistake. I make a selection, and then I just click the ordinary save the visible screen. Could have been an idiot, but after I stopped the recording, I went back and did it properly. Okay, it wasn't a deliberate mistake. I am an idiot. Anyway, if an idiot can do things like this, then hopefully you can. Get this software, have a play with it, see what you think. I think there's lots of possibilities here. Go on, blow me away with what you can do. And catch you next time. Bye.